What is up, everyone? I'm Steve, and these are the Memoirs of an Indonesian American, a show that shares experiences, tips, and tools that have shaped friends of mine to become who they are today. I hope that there's something here that you can relate to, whether you're Indonesian or not. In this episode, I'll be bouncing off ideas with Pearson, a close friend who has had relatable experiences and is a spontaneous adventurer. He's a super cool guy, is passionate about serving his community and others, as well as loving his dog Luna, and eating chicken wings. He's leading and learning to live with purpose while enjoying it every step of the way. I'm proud to call him a friend who sticks closer than a brother, and it's just great and to just sit and talk with him on a regular basis because I know he's willing to listen and share in the struggles, triumphs, and all the unique situation life puts us in. I personally admire Pearson because as much as he is a city boy, he has learned to love the small town life, and that is what we will be discussing today. The pros and cons, the highlights, lowlights, and everything in between of growing up in the city and suburbs to the quiet rural area we both have come to love. Let's have a listen. All right, everyone. I'm here with Pearson, and he'll be talking to us about choosing the small town vibes over the city life. But first, Pearson, we want to get to know you a little better. So what is something you're passionate about?
What am I passionate about? Oh man, that's such a good question. Well, I actually like this. I'm passionate about this, what we're having right now. Like basically the interaction between individuals and hearing their stories and basically getting to know what is the story behind the person that makes them the way that they are. So I love like the interconnectedness with how the human mind functions and how the story that shaped them come into place to making a person. And so basically kind of like the psychology of the human mind, the human behavior, and their interaction with other individuals or maybe even animals.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Awesome. In this segment, we really wanted to talk to Pearson about being a Californian Michigander. He's lived some of his life in California, some here in Michigan, and there's a contrast between the two. One was more of a city suburb life, and currently in Michigan, it's more of a small town rural life. Mm-hmm. So we just want to pick his brain for the pros and cons of each. So let's go ahead and start with city life. Pearson, what are your top 3 pros of living in city life?
Top 3 pros of living in the city life. Okay, let's see. Number 1 is the access to food. That's definitely number 1.
Oh, I forgot to mention that
Yes.
I had my own pros and cons,
Okay.
and we were going to compare and contrast.
Okay.
But that is on my list for pros.
Mm-hmm.
Food options is one of them.
Okay, so that's 1. Number 2 is entertainment.
Entertainment, yes. I combine that actually in the same thing. Activities and food options.
Okay. And thirdly, I would say the pros of living in the city is basically the exposure to many different cultures.
That is on mine as well.
Yeah.
Meeting new people.
Yeah, meeting new people and basically learning about their stories and just what makes them who they are.
Yeah, that's very beneficial, especially if it's a community that you can feel comfortable with, and it's an environment that you do feel a connection to, right?
Yeah, I kind of want to build up on that last one. I think basically the tendency to have this ethnocentrism, the belief that like a certain ethnic group is better than another is, I think, because they don't have much exposure to other cultures and how from the interaction with one another one can see how the culture that they're coming from is actually not like not necessarily better than others, or that from the interaction with others, one can see how actually, in some ways, their culture can actually, how can I say it? It's like fall short to a certain degree, to some standards, and so there's much to be learned from other cultures, I think.
For sure. And I think that's the beauty of being in America.
Yeah.
You have like the melting pot of cultures, races, communities. But unfortunately, some end up sticking to those that they're comfortable with, right? Because you'll go to, like, for example, since we're Asian, we'd go to Asian markets, we'd go to Asian stores, maybe we go to Asian churches. So it's less exposure and we don't get to mingle and interact with other people. Maybe you will. Maybe you go to a supermarket, like a grocery store, or you're at the gas station or something. But those are barely, right, even anything. If you observe, that's another thing, because you could develop some sort of idea just from seeing people rather than actually talking to them and having meaningful conversations.
Yeah. I think, like, you can even see this just within your own culture. Like, if you, like, people in Indonesia, for example, if they have never left out of their kampung, right, their village, and then they come to America, that's how you'll see many of them kind of like what you just described there, in that they will be sticking around with just the same kind of people that they've been sticking around with, and that feeling of ethnocentrism, like where they came from is like the better place than anyone else, can remain in them. And even though, like, let's say you've moved from that kampung in Indonesia and then moved to the United States, sometimes your mind hasn't actually really been broadened because you have just been stuck in that kampung that whole time. And I think it's important for people from wherever they come from, even within their own country. I think they should actually try to travel also and learn about the culture of other people. So then when you move to a different place, you wouldn't have that sense of feeling better than, but just at a different place. If that, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I just rambled on there, but hopefully that made sense.
No, that makes sense. But I think we are privileged to live here in a university, like a town with a university that actually is one of the most culturally diverse ones.
Right.
So you're going to experience that throughout the whole, community, even if it's off campus and around the area, just because we're so saturated with so many different cultures.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about the village that we live in right now, right?
Right, for sure. And I did want to touch on kind of our parents and generations before us migrating, because I feel like they did come here for, quote unquote, a better life, right? Where you have structure, where you can maybe have your own house, whereas in a village that's not so prominent and prevalent, and you just share a house with 5 other families, maybe generations before. But here you get to have your own, and then you experience maybe something different and a lot different, because for our parents, coming to America is a big deal. Like, right? Because people from Indonesia, they're like, oh man, you live in America? That's awesome. You're living in like the lap of luxury.
Yeah.
Right? Would you say that's true?
Oh yeah, definitely. Just for the simple fact that, like, if you were to go back to Indonesia, or if, for example, if I were to go back to Indonesia and find a job there, knowing the fact that I'm holding like a degree from America, for example, I think there's kind of that, like, of me being put in the priority list, I think, like, just because, oh wow, his degree is from from out of the country, from America.
Yeah.
And also for the simpler thing, for example, if, I don't know if your parents have experienced this, but like if they were to go back to Indonesia and family or friends from Indonesia found out about that, they would be like, "Oh man, can you buy us ole ole?" For the listener, ole ole is like what, souvenir or
Souvenirs, gifts.
Like, get us something from America, even though it's just lotion from what is it?
Bath and Body Works.
Bath and Body Works. That's like a luxury for them.
Right.
Whereas over here, we think it's like, oh, it's whatever. But knowing the fact that it's coming from America, it's like, ooh,
For sure. Anyways, getting back to that first point, it's meeting new people,
Right.
being exposed to a lot of people and different cultures, and being in a huge community. And that's what a lot of people thrive off of and are interested in being in. My third one was job opportunities. Living in the city or suburban life, right? Because there are more people, it's more populated and dense. So there's a lot of places that you can find employment.
that's true. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So those are some of the pros. Give me your top 3 cons. What would be some disadvantages to living in the city life?
Living in the
City or
life?
suburb?
Okay. Cons, I would say the expensive living expenses.
I have that too. High cost of living.
High cost of living, and then this may sound very minuscule, but like not too clean of an air. It's like dirty air. And thirdly, con would be just how do I word this? Shoot, I'm taking too long of a pause. You could just edit it. Exposure to bad vices is
that's the risk you run, right?
Yeah.
The more you're exposed is actually the more you're exposed.
I guess the easier accessibility to those vices, I guess, or temptations.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, those are pretty good.
Yeah, don't ask me to expand on what exactly I'm talking about.
Okay, we won't. We'll let the listeners, we'll let them
run their imagination.
Exactly. My other 2 for me was noise. I don't know what it is. But it's just, if it's buzzing, I don't know. For me, not the greatest thing. And then I was thinking, like your exposure thing, mine was more crime. More people, more dense. Maybe you have separation of populations in different communities, and the crime rate might be something that you worry about. Cool. All right, welcome back, everyone. We just heard the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages of the city or suburban life. Now we will jump into the disadvantages and advantages of living in the small town or rural life. For the record, I should mention that we're referring to 2 particular places, California and Michigan, where I know that a lot of Indonesian Americans have started and maybe transitioned to and probably know about along their journey throughout, their experience or living in America. Because within 7-day Adventism and just being Indonesian, California is one place you'd go. Michigan would be the second.
Yes, you tend to go where there is an Adventist institution. And so there's California and there's obviously Michigan.
There are others, but I think those are the populations that every Indonesian strives to visit. There's also Colorado. Colorado's a big one. That's where my parents are. There's Seattle. There's a population there, and New Jersey is a smaller one. I don't know if there are many others. You would think that we'd be all over the board. I know I have a grandmother that lives in Florida, but I don't know many in Texas, which is strange, but
There's a small number of Indonesian in Texas. Yeah.
well, all right. Let's jump into the pros of small town or rural life. Pearson, what do you got for us?
Living in a small town, especially where like stores, market, and whatnot is somewhat far away from where you live, it really teaches you how to live intentionally. And what I mean by that, for example, in California, right? Like, let's say, oh, we need to buy this. You could just jump into your car easily and go to a store, no problem, right? Stores are close by, so you get them. Over here, yeah, sure, store may be close to you, but at the same time, there is the weather element, right? In that here in Michigan, there's snow, and so when it's snowing really hard, one moment you enter your house and the next moment you want to get out, your car may already be filled with snow. And so that's one thing, I guess, it teaches you to be more intentional. That's the pros. And
more resourceful.
More
right?
resourceful. And so you can't really just be like, oh yeah, I can just get things whenever I need, whenever I want. You kind of are forced to like plan out your activities throughout the day so that you wouldn't have to run into having to shovel your driveway or having to brush off the snow off of your windshield type of a thing, because that's something that you don't really think about in California, right? But over here, that's a hassle. You don't really want to have to go in the house only to come to find out that you need to go back to the store because you forgot something, because you run into the whole thing of needing to shovel or brush your windshield.
So that's a two-part, which is learn responsibility, and what was the other thing? Well, to be resourceful.
I guess maybe a number two, but kind of going along with that, is it teaches you to be self-sustaining. And so also for the fact that over here there's more like land, and then the beautiful thing about where we live too, there's many like community gardens where you can plant your own vegetables, greens, maybe even fruits, and so you can really be self-sustaining in that way. And whereas in California, at least from where we're from, right, there's not really too many of that, unless maybe you go further from where you live and from the suburb, like you said, the suburb area.
Right. And it does teach you about what you need and versus what you want.
Right.
Because there are some things that you're just like, oh, I can live without that. And that's what you learn along the way. But then you learn what the essentials are to your life. And as you grow, that'll be more apparent.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right.
So
does
also,
that count? Yeah.
Another what may seemingly as like minuscule thing, but just the fact that it's so green here compared to, I don't know, you've been to San Bernardino area. It's not very green. It's the total opposite of that. It's very, dirt yellow, dry, deserty looking. It's not as pretty as over here. I would say it's somewhat green.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that point, you can just go somewhere where you'll find some green, right?
But in the city life,
yeah,
I guess. But name one place that you can think of, because I can't think of any.
I have no idea. But I know that a lot of our friends that happen to live in California, that's the cop out. Just because we don't have that doesn't mean we can't go find that.
So yeah, there you go. I guess. See, you need to make your, make the way to that place, I guess. Make your way there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Does that count as all three of your things as your pros or advantages?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I have a few more.
What is it?
So you mentioned dirty air if you were in a city or suburban area, but here I put clean air.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it is more green.
Yeah.
it's less populated, but also on top of that, being less populated, less or no traffic.
I can't believe I didn't think of that. Yeah,
Yeah,
true.
I'm telling you, like it's nice at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. that it's not always super crowded bumper to bumper, and you know you have a route home that'll take you all the way, and that's supposed to only take you a few minutes, and it does take you a few minutes.
I
Right?
guess the quote unquote Californian side of me, like why I didn't think of that. We've grown to just be so accustomed to that,
Yeah.
and we have just taken that as just part of our life.
Right.
Sometimes.
Right. I'd be like, that's an hour commute there, and I'd be, and if you're in the city, you're like, oh, that's normal.
Yeah.
Whereas here, I'm like 15-minute commute.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But a few others I have. You mentioned, we mentioned all this stuff, but a place to grow, a real community, and it is a slower pace. That I had all in one. Right, the community that you can grow in, because it is such a. You need to learn to be resourceful because things aren't easily accessible, and you
Yeah.
got to learn how to.
I just thought of something else too. The close knit feeling of like a family here is much stronger than it is in California. Because California is just so huge, right? So you tend to be in cliques. Am I saying that right? Cliques.
Clicks.
Yeah, cliques in California, whereas over here, it's much more dissolved, I would say.
Yeah,
I think,
I'd say so.
right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I'm trying to think as to why that is. Maybe because there's only one Indonesian church here.
I think it's because of the accessibility thing.
Okay.
Right? If you have everything accessible to you, then you'll go ahead and use those. Right? Whereas
Right.
here,
We don't have
that luxury.
access, yeah.
This small community
That's all
has
we
to
got.
work together. Exactly.
Yeah, we all we got.
We are all we got.
Yeah.
So awesome. Cool. And then number 3 kind of goes hand in hand with my last one, which was slow pace, but it's learn to be yourself and you have privacy. Right? In certain places, you might not have privacy. And whatever that means to you, you know that you can achieve that in a smaller, less dense population, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because you don't have necessarily a lot of people blowing up your phone, coming to visit you, or feeling like they need to come visit. Or there's nothing always happening every single day. And you're just like, today I'm going to learn to do this and I'm going to be myself and I want to do what I want to do by myself. And that's okay because you need to learn that.
Yeah. That just made me think about, I guess, jumping right into the cons. I don't know.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. That just made me think about one of the cons. Oh, it's actually more of the cons in the city life. I guess we're going back. So, yeah. I'll just say it anyway.
Sure.
Yeah, the con of city life is that the higher tendency you will have to be keeping up with the Joneses. Because he said, here in the village, here, when we enter this town, the board
It says
literally
village.
says village.
Yep.
But anyways, here in the small town, like you said just now, like you have more privacy and not too many people will be blowing up your phone for like activities or whatnot. See, that's the thing in California. Is like when you learn a few friends are doing a certain thing, the tendency to like want to follow that is going to be higher. But that's not only limited to activities, it could also be just like for attaining things.
Right.
I don't know if you've noticed this in some other like cities where you've lived. Like if a certain family, for example, is, I don't know, like going on vacation, like there's that sense of like, man, how come I'm not going on vacation? I'm gonna go on vacation too. Or getting things like material things, like, oh man, that family just bought their kids iPads. Like at least this is what I've observed and where I've lived, and that like next thing you know, another family will be getting a certain thing for their kids, for example, just because one other family had bought their children something.
Right, right.
So there's the keeping up with the Joneses thing, and it's, I think that's tiring and unnecessary at times, you know.
Definitely. I hear you, for sure. Oh, good. Okay, now let's jump back into the cons of
The cons of-
small town rural life. What do you got for us?
I don't have much except for the flip side of
All the things in the
all
city
the things
life,
in the
right?
city life, you
Yeah.
know, like number one that I really have a gripe on here in our town
Food
is the
options.
food, man. Especially if you get hungry like late at night, whereas in California, you know, you could just, oh, In and Out's open till 2 a.m. You
Yeah.
can drive to In and Out and get food. Yeah, or wherever, really.
And here you
But
have to
in-
open your
over here,
cupboards
yeah,
at 2 a.m. Everything's closed by
Everything's
like
closed.
10, 11.
yeah. What else? What do you have as the cons of living
For
in a village?
me, I do have distance to places. We mentioned traffic, but just the proximity of being able to go to things that you might want to go to, even if it's only once a week or once a month, right? Like Chicago, you probably don't want to go there all the time, but it is available. I also have amenities / internet.
Oh, you think it's lower?
I think it is. I think it is.
Yeah, you're right.
And then you touched on it in the advantages side of the small town rural life. It was weather. That's one of the biggest cons, depending on where you are.
That's true.
And it doesn't have to be up here in Michigan. It doesn't have to be snow. It could be down in Florida. You have hurricanes. It could be down in Texas. You have flooding.
Yeah.
So it just depends. But I put weather, bugs, and wildlife.
I was gonna say weather is a big thing, especially just how gray it gets here in Michigan. Sometimes, man, it messes up with my mood.
Yeah,
If I'm
that's
being
with your
honest.
vibe.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Kill my vibe.
I hear you. I hear you. I wake up and if it's a gray day, like it's about to rain. Now, after it rains, I love it. But before that, I'm just like, do I want to get out of bed today?
Yeah.
For sure. Well, cool. Thank you, Pearson, for your insight.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have anything more to share, but I think that wraps us up for this segment.
That's all I got for
Thank you.
that, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Pearson. All right, last thing I wanted to ask to wrap this segment up is how and what kind of advice you can give to those that are thinking, oh, I might be interested in living in the city life for the rest of my life or in more of a rural life. What kind of advice you can give? Maybe you can share a little bit about how you came to terms on your decision and I guess your preference, not necessarily a decision because it could change. But what are your thoughts, Pearson?
I think it boils down to basically just knowing about yourself and what it is that you value. You know, if you value the flashy things of going out so often, maybe even like every weeknights or every weekends, then yeah, you may want to stay in the city area. But if you like a much simpler lifestyle and actually potentially seeing yourself wanting to like grow what is it, like your own food, which funny enough I'm slowly getting to, you know, that stage of actually wanting to pick up farming life. You know, I don't know how I come to this, but yeah, like I'm growing into actually finding that interesting and wanting to eventually have my own ranch, for example, and have my own horses and chickens.
Nice.
You know, gotta take care of my mental and my chickens, right? As Marshawn from the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah. So
Nice.
knowing your values,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that you value, and
Would it hurt to try out both?
I don't think it would hurt, you know. Find out until you are sure of yourself that, you know what, yeah, I like the small town life, for example. Or if you don't like it, then maybe it's not for you.
And of course, circumstances change.
Right.
Things change.
Right.
But you make that decision for yourself as you get older. Cool. Well, I think that wraps us up in this segment. We'll be hearing more about how Indonesian culture and background play a part in your American life. Be right back. Welcome back, everyone. We have a few more segments, and this is an important one to us here on this podcast. But we wanted to ask Pearson, how much of your Indonesian culture and background play a part in your American life?
Okay.
Do you feel more equipped? Are you different? Are you more special? Let's start with that.
I don't think I feel any more special than others, because I think anyone can be great regardless from where they are coming from. If you put in your time and effort, you can be great. But I guess how I could be different compared to like American culture, it would be just dealing with power dynamics, because in Indonesia, we're very much about addressing someone by their proper title, right? And so I think, in a sense, being polite or politeness is there in me compared to American raised kids, and so like I think offering respect for the elderly is going to be there for me in how to address them, properly. That's very much an Indonesian thing, I feel like. And so just funny little thing, for example, in classes, if I hear any students just call the professor by their first name, that triggers me somehow.
Is that weird for you?
Yeah, I get secondhand trigger, like, what the heck? You're being so disrespectful, not calling them by their like doctorate name or whatever. Or even just last name, I don't know. That triggers me a little bit, like, that sounds so disrespectful, even though it is still their last name. But I think the more proper way to address, I guess this is my Indonesian brain thinking, like, address their title and their name. So when hearing students just go like, hey, Palmer, for example, like a doctor, professor, and just their last name like that, or their first name, I get so like, oh my gosh, this student is so disrespectful. So that's just one way, I guess, how my Indonesian culture play a part in my American life.
Well, I'm sorry, Pearson, then I have to apologize because I do that sometimes. Because sometimes it isn't necessarily a form of disrespect, but I understand from the Indonesian culture that is, right? Because it needs to be addressed properly, formally. Some people are more okay and content just being normal people, right?
Well, you know what's funny though? Like, I think if I were to lucky enough to get to that degree, actually,
you want them to call you by your first name.
Yeah, I wouldn't really care too much about being addressed doctor or whatever,
It's possible some feel that way. But that's good. We're thinking about both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else to kind of wrap things up and talk to your audience?
I think that was good.
All right. Cool. Stay tuned and we'll wrap things up. The last segment, I just wanted to ask you about your daily necessity or your important tool, something that gets you through the day.
Okay. Well, I would say a good pomade. Wait, is that a tool?
That's a tool.
You could consider that as a tool, right? And I guess a hair dryer. This is kind of like echoing your first guest. Yeah, I'm a fan of this podcast. Your first guest says, about like looking good, feel good, right? Yeah, I align with that sentiment. So, like with my hair, if I don't blow it, like it's super flat and it's not gonna look good. So I need a good blow dryer and a good pomade to
For sure.
keep the hair strand in place.
For sure. I've gone through so many different hair gels
Mm.
and hair glues and pomades. But I actually use Got to Be Glued. That's what I use.
Okay.
Yeah. I just a little dab and mix it in with water.
Nice.
Get your hair pretty good.
Cool.
Cool. And to wrap things up, your favorite quote and or Bible verse if you got both.
My favorite quote is from Ellen White from Life Sketches, where she says, "We have nothing to fear for the future, except as we shall forget the way the Lord has led us and his teaching in our past history." And why this is my favorite quote is I think a lot of times we get into discouragement and we forget that God has been good to us, like so many times. And if we would only just look back and remember like the good things that he has done for us, I think that would put things into perspective in the circumstances that we're really in. So it's important to look back, journal, look back into your journal and jot down like what you've prayed for or what God has answered in your prayers, and you'll be surprised as to how many of those things will actually make you feel good about the growth that has taken place in your life, or just even unanswered prayers.
For sure.
Yeah. Verse is basically in line with that quote. I like Deuteronomy 2, verse 7, where it says, "For the Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hand. He knows you're trudging through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you. You have lacked nothing." So I like to sometimes change the wording to, what is it? These how many years I've lived in the United States, the Lord your God has been with you and you have lacked nothing. So it's really important that we look back on our lives and how God has led us. That'll change your perspective in whatever negative or gray circumstances you may be in right now.
For sure. Well, thank you, Pearson.
Yeah.
I hope you all have enjoyed this podcast. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about learning where to live, pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages, and how our Indonesian culture plays a part into American life. But that wraps us up. I'm Steve.
And I'm Pearson.
Bye.
Bye.